This isn't the first time that the president has met his army generals since the start of the crisis in the country. But his statements tell a great deal about his confusion, and it's clear that he has been inspired by Gaddafi's speeches.
But thousands of young Yemenis who have taken to the streets across the country have totally different demands. The departure of the regime. Demands waved off by Saleh's ruling party as illegitimate.
It won't be an Egyptian-style change. It won't be a Tunisian type of change. But unfortunately, if it goes to become very close to what's happening now in Libya, then I don't by any means rule out the possibility of an international and regional intervention here.
For these protesters, the movement has come a long way, inspired many Yemenis and made sacrifices that calls for dialogue by the government are too late. But if the president is determined to cling to power, the opposition and the anti-government protesters say they will muster more men here in the capital and across the country to put an end to what they describe as an autocratic regime. Hashim Al-Barra, AlJazeera, Sana'a.
Chile is marking the one-year anniversary since last year's massive earthquake. AlJazeera travels back into the disaster zone right after the break. And the birth of a new constitution in Egypt. But will the slogans of the popular uprising be lost in translation?
Hello again. It's been pretty stormy for some of us in the northern parts of Asia. The satellite picture shows the cloud gradually working its way across South Korea there and eventually across Japan. It has given us torrential downpours, and in South Korea we've been seeing around 50 to 60 millimetres of rain, so very, very wet here. Here, though, it is now dry, and that dry weather will then spread across for most of us in Japan as well. Over the next few days, though, we're going to see the winds come down from the northwest, and so along this western coast there's still going to be some flurries of snow. In the east, there's a better chance of a dry day and maybe even some sunshine coming through as well. Further west there, you can see very, very cold here. Looks like Pyongyang no higher than -1 as a top temperature during the day, thanks to those rather vicious winds. Now a bit further south, and here it's a little bit milder. Looks like Hong Kong up at 25 degrees, and that's 77 in Fahrenheit, but it's not going to last. This area of cloud is going to work its way southwards as we head through Wednesday, and then the temperatures really will drop off. No higher than around 18 or 19 in Hong Kong as we head through the next few days. Now, meanwhile, if we head over towards India, we can see that most of us here getting away with a fine day, except for in the far north. More snow's working its way in here, and that area of wet weather's also working its way through parts of Pakistan and Afghanistan too.
Unpopular with some at home, untested overseas. The first year has not been easy for David Cameron and his coalition government. In conjunction with U2, Al Jazeera asks your questions to the British Prime Minister. World View, an interview with David Cameron at this time on Al Jazeera.
See the world from every angle and every side. Al Jazeera.
Welcome back. A reminder of our top stories here on Al Jazeera. Tunisia's interim prime minister has stepped down. Al-Beji Kaid Sepsi will succeed Mohamed Ghannouchi, who resigned on Sunday. It followed renewed violence in the capital, Tunis, prior to his departure. The city closest to Libya's capital has been seized by anti-Gaddafi protesters, but demonstrators in Zawiya believe Libyan troops on the outskirts are preparing a counterattack. What to do about Libya? That's likely to be the main talking point when the U.S. Secretary of State meets other foreign ministers shortly. Hillary Clinton is in Geneva, where a UN Human Rights Council meeting is due to start. Meanwhile, the UN Refugee Agency says it's facing a humanitarian emergency as foreigners pour out of Libya. It says close to 100,000 migrant workers have fled to Tunisia in the past week, most of them from Egypt and Tunisia. But labor groups say tens of thousands of Asians remain trapped inside Libya. The Philippines' new foreign minister went to Libya himself, despite being warned against it. Albert Del Rosario led the evacuation of some 400 workers. Well, let's now speak to Ed Malaya. He's a spokesman for the Philippines Foreign Ministry, and he joins us on the line from Manila. Thank you very much for speaking to us, Mr. Malaya. Do tell us first about the circumstances surrounding the evacuation of these foreign workers, the 400 workers. How did this come about?
Well, Foley, the Philippine government is fully committed to ensuring the safety and welfare of our overseas Filipino workers in Libya. That is why the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Albert Del Rosario himself, went to Tunisia so that he can see for himself and undertake this repatriation as quickly as can be done. And he went to Tunis together with one of our senior officials in charge of migrant workers affairs. And after Tunis, he then reached Jerba, which is the Tunisian city nearest the border. And seeing how horrendous the conditions there of our Filipinos who are within Libya, he deemed it necessary to go into Libya itself. And with him were only about 3 or 4 foreign affairs officials, including an embassy driver from our embassy in Tripoli, and they had a 2.5-hour drive into Libya, and ultimately they were able to reach Tripoli and went to the Philippine embassy there, and he quickly gathered the Filipinos who were awaiting repatriation, and there and then he organized a convoy of about 55 vans and buses, and this was done all yesterday, Sunday.
So he went into Tripoli himself, the foreign minister. Do you know if any arrangements, any accords or agreements were made with the Gaddafi regime to allow for the foreign minister to go to Tripoli and help with these evacuations?
Well, he just decided that it was necessary for him to go into Libya. And because we are very much concerned about what is happening.
Was there any discussion with the Gaddafi regime to allow him to go into Libya and rescue these foreign workers? Because as you are aware, it's not just Filipinos who are stranded right now in the country, and it's been extremely difficult for them to get out.
That is right. I'm not aware of prior arrangements having been made with the Libyan government, and it was not his intention to meet with Libyan officials. And what he did was simply to go to our relocation sites, because we are very much concerned about the security situations over there, particularly how it impacts on our Filipino overseas workers. And before the end of that day, before nightfall, he was able to bring out about 400 of our Filipino nationals.
So 400 nationals rescued so far. 30,000 Filipinos work in Libya. What's being done for those who are still trapped inside the country, and for those who are stranded at the border with Tunisia and Egypt? What are you doing to help them?
Yes, we think that we have been able to evacuate most, if not all, of our nationals in Tripoli who would like to leave the country. On the other hand, we do know that there are about 1,500 Filipino nationals who are awaiting evacuation in the port city of Benghazi, and we have made arrangements for a Greek-owned vessel chartered by us to proceed to Benghazi tomorrow and pick them up.
Okay, thank you very much for speaking to us. That's Ed Malaya, spokesman for the Department of Foreign Affairs in the Philippines. Thank you very much for your time. Now, officials in Egypt have unveiled the first proposed political reform since the revolution there. While they allow new political parties, restrictions on the participation of the Muslim Brotherhood have not been lifted. Anita McNaught reports from Cairo.
As emotions subside on Tahrir Square, the business of making change happen for all Egyptians has begun. The Egyptian constitution perpetuated the country's draconian emergency laws and consolidated power in the hands of the former president. This committee of legal experts was tasked by Egypt's temporary rulers, the military, with proposing reforms to 6 articles. They tackled 11. But one controversial paragraph remains untouched, Article 5, that prohibits parties with religious affiliations from standing in elections. One of the committee members is with the Muslim Brotherhood, the party most affected by this exclusion. Far from being concerned about the omission, he believes it was too contentious for them to touch.
It's a flawed article, but we didn't want to amend any article that had an ideological dimension. We're leaving that to an elected committee.
But political analyst Gamel Sultan doesn't think this law will pose an obstacle to the Muslim Brotherhood in the future.
It is not about the text itself. It's about the context within which this text is going to be interpreted. And I think the current and the future context will be much more tolerant vis-à-vis the Muslim Brothers.
Egypt's popular revolution threw up a new generation of progressive political activists, the hope of a vibrant and reinvigorated country, a break with the past. But critics of these first tentative steps say the march to new elections is going too fast, with these new players not given the time to form parties. And they warn the constitutional reforms don't go far enough. They don't secure a place for the new voices. They may even entrench the old ones.
This is a system that is likely to create or to allow a bigger chance for the Muslim Brothers plus the NDP to dominate the new parliament. It looks like some sort of a deal is there, a sort of a deal at the expense at the new, modern, secular, social and political forces.
The people of Egypt are impatient for change. If they find 6 months down the track that the revolution has merely delivered a new version of the old order, some of these people are going to be seriously disappointed. Anita McNaught, AlJazeera, in Tahrir Square, Cairo.
Dozens of men, women and children have been fleeing Côte d'Ivoire's main city despite the presence of UN peacekeepers. There's been more fighting between forces loyal to incumbent President Laurent Gbagbo and those who back opposition leader Alassane Ouattara. The UN's Human Rights Agency says between 20 and 30,000 people have left just one district in Abidjan. New Zealand's Prime Minister says 2 major earthquakes in September are likely to cost about $15 billion. Last week's quake in Christchurch killed at least 148 people. At least 50 others are still missing. Funerals are being held for some of the victims on Monday. Large parts of the city have been reduced to rubble. At least 400 homes have been destroyed in the Bolivian capital after a hillside collapse following heavy rains. No one died, but a La Paz government spokesman says at least 44 people have been killed in recent weeks by flooding and mudslides. Now, the British film The King's Speech has won the big awards at the annual Oscars ceremony in Hollywood. Rob Reynolds has this report.
And the Oscar goes to The King's Speech, Ian Canning.
The story of a stammering sovereign won Hollywood's top honor Sunday as The King's Speech scored Best Picture. Colin Firth's performance as a king tormented by a speech impediment and self-doubt earned him the Best Actor Oscar. The film world's shining stars and lesser lights strutted down the red carpet in their best tuxedos and most glamorous gowns, despite unusually chilly temperatures that set many bare shoulders shivering. This year's Best Actress award went to Natalie Portman in Black Swan for her compelling portrayal of a ballerina pushed over the edge of madness even as she achieves an artistic triumph.
This is insane, and I truly, sincerely wish that the prize tonight was to get to work with my fellow nominees. I'm so in awe of you.
A gritty boxing film scored an Oscars 1-2 punch. as both Melissa Leo and Christian Bale took home Oscars for Best Supporting Actor and Actress in The Fighter. The warmest applause of the night was showered on Portman. She fell in love with the choreographer on the set of Black Swan, and they're expecting a baby boy this spring. Rob Reynolds,